There was no talking. There was no smiling. There were only rocks. I was not a smart pony. I'd said it before. Others knew it. I was impulsive, immature, reckless. I knew two very smart ponies, though. P21 taught himself to pick locks and hack terminals when he wasn't even supposed to be allowed to read. He somehow convinced Duct Tape to break just about every rule for fraternization and teach him the skills he'd needed to eventually escape from the stable. Morning Glory was a medical technician for the Enclave. She was younger than me, and she was already working for the only ponies who seemed capable of designing anything new. She could discern injuries and administer drugs at the drop of a feather. She'd even begun researching reasons behind the mental degradation and psychotic tendencies of raiders by analyzing their brains. Me? I shot things. It wasn't not an intellectually demanding job. In fact, I was pretty sure it was based on one of the top 3 most common skill sets in the wasteland. It involved a steady horn, a wanton disregard for personal injury, and a lot of ammunition. And when shooting things was insufficient, I swapped to bashing things with a heavy metal stick. The effectiveness of both methods varied greatly from situation to situation. For instance, when I'd ignored the warnings of a young filly, both proved woefully inadequate in preventing her from being torn in two. So I had come to accept that I was not, nor would I ever be, a smart pony. Thus, when P21 and Glory stated that I was an absolute idiot facing down 5 armed farm ponies almost unarmed and unarmored, I could only conclude that they were right. When they elaborated that I should have involved them because my safety mattered to them, I likewise could only assume that they knew something that I didn't. There was just one catch. It seemed that with 2 events, I had somehow ended up with a rather gargantuan bounty on my head. The simple act of cutting my head and pip-buck off, presenting them to the Reaper named Deus would earn a staggering amount of wealth. Capturing me alive would double that amount, presumably so that Deus could take his time torturing me and violating my anus. He was that kind of pony. P21 would have killed any and all would-be bounty claimants. By attempting to take my life, he assured me they forfeited theirs. An eye for an eye, hoof for a hoof, every pony ending up blind and lame. I couldn't do it. These 5 ponies weren't Deus. They weren't monsters. They had a need for the money, same as any pony. I could have killed them easily. Playing it back in my head, it wouldn't have taken much. They'd hoped to take me unawares and alone. A lucky shot in the night. Was I wrong to let them live? Morning Glory was put out with me for quite another reason. In fact, facing said threats alone, I had somehow violated one of the tenets of friendship. One of us faced a threat, we all faced it. That was apparently a rule of friendship. Trying to protect her was wrong. Better she stood beside me like she had fighting the dragon mutants. She wanted to be there when I fought monsters, when I faced down bounty hunters, when I murdered a roomful of traumatized children. Didn't she realize I wasn't a good pony? I wasn't a hero. I was just trying to do better because everywhere else I looked, I saw things getting worse and worse. And the only thing that made sense was trying to make it better. Sometimes, old Haas said that Big Macintosh was a hero because he would have given his life for any pony. I sometimes wondered if he could turn in the bounty on myself and split the proceeds among the Crusaders, P21 and Glory. She was going to get hurt if she stayed with me. Hurt very badly. To top it all off, I had a mystery inside my pip-buck. A computer file that was apparently so valuable that my stable had been raided to retrieve it. It was encrypted. Finding out just what it was supposed to do was going to be likewise very expensive. Yet it was the only reliable chance I had short of trusting the Enclave, which I wasn't ready to do. At the moment, though, none of that mattered a damn, as I sat in detention in a classroom on the 2nd floor of the Rosehoof Academy library building with P-21, Glory, and the Crusaders. We'd found the Academy under lockdown. I didn't want to speculate on what had happened to any students caught in the lockdown 200 years ago, but at least there weren't a lot of bones in the classrooms. Robronco's sentries patrolled the Academy perimeter, and so far no bounty hunters had faced the metal predators. The 7 of us had stumbled onto the grounds and been ordered to report to the office or face immediate vaporization. I had to admit, I considered the shooting option first and second, but the fact that this was the Academy buildings were the closest and largest structures to Brimstone's Fall, and if we started shooting, I'd not only draw attention, but also take away a layer of protection I could use right now. The 7 of us had been taken in to see the acting Dean Hardy, one of the spidery levitating robots. The office was a complete disaster area, which was actually pretty typical given that Equestria was a whole, complete disaster area. A skeleton lay in the corner with a bullet through its skull. "Please explain why you are breaking lockdown procedures, miss." A buzz, click, whirl, and a beep, and I looked down at some of the yellowed papers on the desk, scanning them for a name. "Marigold," I supplied, and seized on a sudden whim as I threw my hooves around P-21, who went stiff as a rock. "I was just looking to spend some time alone with my buck friend." A glance at the page. Sure shot? Please don't tell my mom?" Because she was in a stable, and I was pretty sure she'd be miffed if she had to come pick me up from school. More clicks and beeps. "Miss Marigold, this is the 3rd infraction for fraternizing with male students that you've made within 200 years. I'm afraid I have no choice but to contact your parents and have you all report for lunch detention in the library for the duration of the lockdown." "Yes, Dean Hardy," I said as adolescently as possible. "Can we at least go to our rooms to get our homework?" The dean beeped as his camera swung from one of us to the next. "Very well. Please carry your hall passes with you at all times, or risk vaporization." He reached into the drawer of the dean's desk and withdrew a stack of faded paper cards covered in yellowing lamination. Each one hung from a lanyard and still had a faintly glowing glyph stamped on it. "Now, please report to detention in room 203 of the library." Thus, the 7 of us became the newest students at Rosehoof Academy. "That was brilliant!" Glory gushed as we trotted by Robronco's sentries, urging us to get to class. "How did you think of that?" "Do you have any idea how much time I spent in detention?" I asked her with a grin. "Oh." Suddenly she went red. I blinked at her and then grinned. "Let me guess. This is your first time?" "Well, yes," she admitted. I put a hoof around her neck and pulled her close, grinning at her. "Well then, let me give you some advice. Always sit in the back row. Always pass on notes. If the teacher asks what you're doing, the answer is working, not studying. Oh, and remember, you have a bladder the size of a pea." "You really were in detention a lot," Glory muttered with some worry as I lowered my hoof. She looked over at P-21. "You were probably more of a diligent student," she said to him. I winced. "Please don't bite her head off," I begged silently. Thankfully, he was in one of his more wistful moods as he looked at the decaying library. "No, but I would have been," he said as he looked down at a textbook showing 2 red-striped zebras. I thought they looked a bit like hoofed candy canes myself. I looked at the caption beneath. "The Proditor, or traders in zebra tongue, were those few zebras willing to allowed to fight for Equestria against their own kind. Using talismans to permanently alter their stripe color, they fought with distinction until being phased out due to security concerns after the Battle of Shattered Hoof Ridge." I noticed the Crusaders were looking a bit nervous. "What's up?" I asked them. First day of school jitters? No, Allegro protested, trying to look tough. It's just, Adego muttered. There's supposed to be goats here. I would have laughed, but then again I laughed when Scoodles seemed afraid in the boneyard. Not again. Besides, the wasteland, who knew what you might run into? Well, if there are, they'll have to get through me first, I replied. Sonata looked a little more at ease, at least. Using their hall passes, P-21, Glory, and the Crusaders dispersed from the classroom and set about looting edible, drinkable, or medical goods that they could get their hooves on. If they found an armory here, well, that'd just show how hardcore Cheerily made education prior to the bombs going off. This left me alone in the second floor of the library looking out at Brimstone's Fall. And we were doomed because I was just going to have to come up with a plan. Me, the not smart pony. Brimstone's Fall wasn't much to look at, really. Just a round, jagged hole punched into the Badlands surface. It had been a gemstone mine. Then, during the height of the war, a dragon had fallen right on top of the mine works. The Shadowbolt's Pegasus strike force, along with heavy ground support, slew a powerful dragon allied with the Zebras, but hundreds of soldiers had died before the dragon perished. I knew all this because there was a framed news article next to the window. In 200 years, it hadn't changed much. It lay right beside rail lines stretching to the southwest towards Philadelphia. On the surface were a large administration building and two long barrack-style houses. Since I didn't see any slaves, I assumed that they had to be quartered underground. Two nested chain-link fences topped by razor wire surrounded the whole and the three buildings, with a guarded hoof bridge built over the rail spurs where they passed through the fences. A chain-link gate blocked the space under the bridge. Maybe we could find... What the fuck? I stopped and stared at the corner of the room. Had something moved? One of the Crusaders playing a trick on me? My mind finally cracking? Slowly, I rose to my hooves and checked my EFS. Nothing. My eyes scanned the room thoroughly, mane itching like crazy. I muttered. Nothing at all. Bullshit. In the wasteland, it's never nothing. I put my back to the wall until the others returned. It happened again. I'd swear that I'd seen some dingy papers shift on their own right before the six entered the room. I rubbed my eyes, and then the others were inside. You okay? You look spooked, P-21 said, concerned, before he tossed me a Sparkle Cola. I caught it with my magic and deftly popped the top. It was warm, but it was Sparkle Cola. Yeah, just trying to figure out how to get in there, I said as I scanned the mine once again for some chink in their defenses. The guards moved in 3s and 4s. There wasn't the slightest bit of cover to use to approach them from the ground, and they were the neighbors. Along the highway between the mine and the road was a strip mall. Most of the shops seemed more or less intact, and there was a large gathering of ponies there. At least 20 or so. Allegro. Who are they? He trotted to the window as I held the binoculars to him. Oh, them. Pecos. They're just a gang out of flank. Not as crazy as raiders. They usually work protection for the slavers. Great. Between the Pecos and the slavers, I was looking at 40 or 50 enemies. They're not slavers. Medley huffed. I told you, but no one listens to me. Slavers got to have a license out of paradise to be slavers. Otherwise, they'd just make slaves out of each other. The licenses are, like, super expensive. Explains why they could afford my bounty, I said as I pursed my lips. Then I frowned as I watched a train come out of the mine. It was only 4 cars, which were being hauled by dozens of slaves, as a slaver liberally lashed them with a whip. To my amazement, I saw several zebras among the slaves. I suppose slavers couldn't be choosers. The train crawled to a stop as it passed under the bridge, the guards above sweeping their weapons while 2 ponies checked beneath for escapees. Once past the checkpoint, the train started to crawl towards Hoofington. "Where are they going?" I asked. "Tracks lead to the tunnels. Ain't safe down there. Ghouls and worse. Not sure where they go past that," Allegro said with his own curious frown. I chewed on a hoof as I looked down the strip mall again. If I attacked the mine, then the Pecos would reinforce the slaver guards. If I attacked the Pecos and lived, then the mine would be alert. I looked from pony to pony. They all wore cowboy hats and leather jackets with some twister or tornado patch on the back. Better yet, this gang was co-ed. I smirked. "Hey, P-21. Think you can sneak down there and snag me a hat and jacket?" "Why, what are you planning?" he asked with a frown. "Something not too smart." "Well, if we're going to be stuck in detention all day, at least one of us needs to be in a gang." It took P-21 quite some time to get the garments I needed. That was fine. I asked the Crusaders every bit of trivia I could on the Pecos. The gang had muscle, pride, ambition, and not much else going for it. Not quite a joke, but definitely a long way from the top of the gang food chain. The sun was just starting to set when the train returned. Lots of empty boxes and crates. Apparently the trade was all one way. Did the gems go back to paradise or somewhere else? As I waited for Glory and the Crusaders, they went to look for more supplies. That left me alone with my thoughts. The plan wasn't quite together yet. I wanted the slavers out of the operation, but niggling questions kept popping up. What stopped another band from entering into the mines? I could blow the mines, assuming P-21 had the skill and the mine had the dynamite. What about the slaves that had nowhere to go? Sending them to Stockyard was hardly a sure bet, and sending them anywhere else would make them bait for raiders or more slavers. And I was not alone. I could feel it. My mind went nuts as I slowly looked around the room once more. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't hear anything. I still didn't think I was alone. I rose to my hooves, looking at the overturned desks and bookshelves and cubbies. The teacher's desk. The teacher's desk. I trotted over to the nightstand in front of it, with a small frown. My horn glowed as I shoved the large desk back against the wall as hard as I could. Something shimmered faintly as hooves clattered on the teacher's desktop. Then a long, thin rifle barrel appeared from thin air, pressed right against my forehead. This close, I could make out the faintest of blurs in the air. "Hey, you've had hours to shoot me in the back. So what's up?" No response, and that rifle continued to press just underneath my horn. I didn't blink, and somehow I doubted they did either. There was a blue flash, and a shimmering gray cloak appeared, draped around a lithe equine. A live, striped equine. He reached up with a hoof and brushed the hood of his cloak back to look down at me with deep azure eyes. I had to admit I was impressed and scared out of my gourd at the same time. I also didn't dare to show it with a rifle to my head. He held it in his forelegs in the strangest way I'd ever imagined, yet without the slightest bit of strain. His mouth rested lightly on the trigger. I wasn't sure how he avoided falling on his face, balancing on just his back legs. "Blackjack," I said, gesturing to myself. "And I really hope I don't have to talk slow, 'cause then I'll look really dumb," I added. His voice was just as soft as P-21 on his soulry days. "Lancer. Name, occupation, hobby?" "Okay, Lancer," I said. Like I said, I don't think you want to kill me, and I'd rather not kill you." "Liar," he said quietly. "All ponies do. It is what you live for." Of all the shit going on in my life, you're telling me I'm going to get killed over a war that was over 2 centuries ago? The war is not over. The remnant persists. he answered. Right. I groaned as I folded my hooves onto the desktop, resting my chin on them and closing my eyes with a sigh. Who's holding a rifle to whose head? Who pushed the desk rather than firing a gun? I don't want to fight you, particularly since he would turn invisible and had a rifle longer than my body pressed to my noggin. Those were some pretty impressive liabilities to overcome. I was taking a good long look at the weapon while trying not to go cross-eyed. You're going to make me do something stupid, aren't you, Lancer? The sound of Glory and the Crusaders, and possibly P-21 as well, returning made his eyes dart to the door. Yep, time for something stupid. My horn flashed as I deftly depressed what I prayed was the magazine eject, while my magic retracted back the bolt and ejected the round from the chamber. Then I caught the shell with my magic and beamed him right in the face with the heavy bullet. My hooves on the desk shot out and yanked his rear hooves out from under him. He quickly recovered. Damn, didn't he though? He flipped over through the air, catching the fallen magazine in his hoof and slammed it back into the weapon as he landed on all fours. The rifle lay along his back, his tail curling around the trigger as he sighted along the underside of the rifle. Then he felt the barrel of my shotgun pressing against the underside of his chin, and his eyes glanced down at the glowing weapon. I do not want to kill you, I said quietly. But I would, and damn him if he forced me to use P-21's universal counterattack policy on here. Lancer slowly pointed the rifle away, looking surprised for a moment. I took my gun off him as Glory's hooves reached the door, and I said loudly, I have company, Glory. Please don't spook him. He's very good with a rifle. Glory frowned as she poked her head around the door. Oh, she said delicately, eyes wide in shock as she laid her eyes on Lancer. Slowly he backed up, keeping his rifle roughly between two of us. Oh. The Crusaders immediately took over. Right, so, like I said, I don't want to kill you, and I'm pretty sure you don't want to kill me. I reached out of the window and gestured to the mine with my head. In fact, I bet you're here for the same reason as I am. Free the slaves? He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. I covered my face with a hoof, groaning. Would you just trust me? I would not be opposed to seeing my people returned to freedom. He finally answered. Progress! Progress is good. Okay, so, I'm trying to put together a plan. A zebra with a gun would likely fit in very nicely. I had no clue how, but I wanted to know if he'd cooperate at all. Do you serve the stars? He asked me bluntly. What? I've never seen the stars with my own eyes, or the moon, or the sun. All I've ever seen is that sky out there. I pointed out the window to the cloud layer. Then who do you serve? As calmly as he said it, I was pretty sure that my answer might lead to me getting shot soon. I really did not want to get shot by that rifle. Of all the ponies in the wasteland, you had to ask me a philosophical question? You should know that I'm something of an idiot, I said, hoping for a reaction. A laugh, a smile, nothing. Great. I sighed, rolling my eyes. I don't know if there's a who anymore, but I guess I serve a what? Doing better, making things better, I said as I looked at him. If that's not good enough or specific enough, then I'm sorry. I didn't know there was going to be an oral exam today. He straightened, and I relaxed as he sat down and directed his rifle at the ceiling. It is sufficient, he said calmly. How do you plan on freeing the slaves? Well, that depends upon if P-21 had any luck shopping, I said as I leaned over to look past Glory at the blue pony, who looked positively stunned at the sight of the zebra in our detention room. I hadn't seen his eyes so big since Prince Splendid. I smiled at him. Hey, P-21, this is Lancer. He's been nice enough to not shoot me. Please be nice back. He set down a jacket and a beaten cowboy hat and some boots. Oh, I'll try. And he did. He actually managed to smile. Hey. Lancer did not respond. Apparently, zebras had a stoicism thing. At least Lancer certainly did. The jacket and hat had clearly seen better days. I shucked my security barding and shrugged into the jacket. I really hoped the material came from something other than a Brahmin, or worse. I looked at Glory. So here's the plan. I'm going to go down there and find out just how keen those Pecos are on protecting the mine. If things go bad, I'd like you on the roof of the building on that end. If I have to bolt, I would like some covering fire. That'd be great. You do realize that the Pecos wouldn't blink at killing you for the bounty, right? P21 asked. I heard them talking. Apparently, the only thing keeping them from running off looking for you is their deal with the mine. I could use that as a plan B if I had to. I pretty much figured. But their leader's smart. I might be able to give them a better long-term agreement. I had saw the back of one of their boots apart from to get it to fit over my pip buck. Unfortunately, Glory had some duct tape that closed it up. What the fuck? Anyway, in the wasteland, beggars can't be choosers. I unzipped the duffel bag. Okay, alcohol, booze, cigarettes. If you pick 'em up anywhere, put 'em in here. I'm going to need to make myself pretty popular on short notice. P21 and Glory went through their saddlebags and produced a fair amount of things that I'd asked for. Where did you find all that? I asked, looking at the half-empty bottles of scotch and cartons of cigarettes. Teacher's lounge, P21 replied, not taking his eyes off Lancer in the corner. Figures? Okay, it's getting dark. I'll start down now. If you see me running, do what you can to keep them off me, I said to Glory. The great Pegasus beamed brightly and nodded once. P21 nodded as well. Lancer just stared. I set my bag across my shoulders and floated my shotgun as I headed for the stairs back down. Blackjack? Hissed Sonata from the filly's bathroom, her eyes wide as she glanced through the door at Lancer. You shouldn't trust him, she warned. Why? Because he's a zebra? I asked with a little half-smile. He's a bad zebra. The remnants. They do terrible things, Blackjack. The filly said as she shivered. We can't stay here. As soon as we can, we're gonna run. Robots won't chase us far if they catch us at all. But where will you go? We got a place over near Chapel. We'll head there. She pointed with a hoof along the rail tracks. I glanced back at Lancer again, as he looked coolly down at the textbook I'd glanced at earlier before kicking it aside. Maybe she was right, but I needed all the help I could get. Okay, Sonata, I'll remember what you said. I stepped back and let her run down the hall towards the stairs. The other three peeled out of their hiding places to follow her. Great. Now my mane was itching again. I was not a smart pony. For example, none of my plans were completely pulled together. There were little gaps here and there that I had to fill in on the fly. Actually, if you look at all my plans, that's generally how they ran. Nice strings of improvisation pieced together with a tiny bit of solid reasoning. This plan was simple. Send the Pecos off on a wild parasprite hunt to the north. It wasn't always just because my brain was being lazy, though. Sometimes it was because no matter how well you plan, you'll always hit that point where everything falls apart. For instance, I wasn't even halfway to the strip mall before some pony started shooting. Again, it wasn't me, and again, it wasn't at me. The fact that some pony was shooting this close to me, though, certainly put a nice and simple plan behind determining just what was going on. My EFS gave me one clue. A big red bar and 2 amber non-hostile ones. I put my rump in gear as I raced across the scrubland towards the shooting. Escaped slaves, crusaders in trouble. Nope. Rad scorpion. Every bit as large as the monster that had nearly eaten Glory and me in that gravel pit. 2 ponies tried to return fire with a lever-action shotgun, or revolver, and a revolver. But in the twilight, their accuracy was at a huge disadvantage. Me, I had enough radiation in me to know exactly where I was aiming at. Yeah! I shouted as I raced towards the scene. Just in time, too. As I got close, the monster knocked one of the ponies down with a swipe of a huge claw. Here! Here! Come here! I didn't even bother with the buckshot, loading slugs on the fly. The heavy shot battered and splattered at its many eyes as I fired into the front of it as fast as I could. Its heavy pincers snapped at me as I moved, but in the minimal armor of the Pecos outfit I was in, I was able to leap aside while blasting it again with the shotgun. I laughed like a maniac. Anything to keep its attention on me and off the fallen pony. The other, the unicorn with the lever action, wasted no time picking her shots. The magnum rounds fired by her rifle were almost as effective as my own slugs. With 2 targets to choose, the red scorpion stung at one of us and pinched at the other. Finally, my luck worked out, and the slug obliterated its skull. It collapsed into a twitching heap. "Tumbleweed, you stung?" The unicorn asked as she rushed to her fallen friend. The earth pony curled up in a ball, shaking. Shit. Damn it. I knew exactly how she felt. "I've got something for that," I said as I opened up the duffel bag and pulled out some of Glory's anti-venom. I jammed it into the poisoned pony's flank and pushed on the plunger. She took a little bit longer, then relaxed a touch. "Anti-venom. Never leave home without it." "Thanks. How you managed to dance around that critter, I'll never know. Can't see my hoof in front of my face," she complained as she reached around. I pushed the mirrored glasses a little further up my muzzle as I checked the earth pony's breathing. She seemed like she was doing better. "What are you two doing out here?" I asked. Before they could answer, a spotlight from one of the towers on the fence lit up and washed us in in a harsh yellow glare. A voice over loudspeakers said in mock sympathy, "Ah, I should have bet on the Scorp." There was laughter, and then the voice warned, "Get back in your hole, Pecos." A bullet smacked into the dirt at our hooves. They were in range, I marveled, and then seethed. Assholes. "You must be new. Fresh out of flank?" she asked as we helped her friend get to her hooves and walked her away from the tower. "Yeah, name's Marigold," I replied. "Dusty trails. This is Tumbleweed," she snorted as we picked our way towards the distant lights. I had little trouble, but the pair stumbled over the uneven ground. "Well, you want my advice? Keep walking. Being a Pecos out here, it's fun enough when you can strut around and flank, but you're getting screwed in the worst ways here." "Oh, yeah." My mane pickled like crazy. "How so?" "You just saw it. Sidewinder's got his protection racket, but he gets the caps and we get left out here for weeks. We're supposed to deal with trouble, but all we really get is bashed around by those bastards at the mine, the critters in the waste, and any slaver looking to up their quota." The strip mall had to be getting its power from somewhere, as neon lights poured into the cracked parking lot. It wasn't a town, per se. I couldn't see ponies raising families here. It seemed more like a glorified hangout for the Pecos. One large shop bore flickering red neon letters. Pecos Bill's Western Wear. The other was a bar named Twister's. In the middle were a liquor store, looted long ago, a gun store, and a barber shop. "Seriously?" I asked as we made our way back towards the bar. "You're supposed to be protecting them, but they'll snatch you if you're alone." "Yep. We're not licensed with Paradise, so better not be near the mine on your lonesome. They'll invite you in and then you'll never leave," she sighed. "But being a Pecos is better than being solo, or so I keep telling myself every damn day." I gave a grin and prayed to Celestia she didn't ask me why I happened to be on my lonesome. I'm gonna lay down Dusty, Tumbleweed said, the brown mare giving me a grateful smile. Thanks for the medicine, ma'am. There was something in her vivacious eyes that bothered me. She kept twitching and swallowing. You sure she's okay? I asked worriedly, watching her twitch as she made her way towards the apparel store. Yeah, probably just the poison or something she ate, Dusty Trails said, as the sand-hiding pony returned, or leaning on me towards the bar. Suddenly, 3 bucks rolled out of the door, kicking and biting each other. Dusty just stepped around them. Inside were ponies drinking, talking, hoof wrestling, or reading very ragged magazines. It was the cards being dealt, though, that drew my eyes. You play? Dusty asked with a nod of her hoof. A bit, I said with a grin. A few minutes later, I settled in at the table, passing around a bottle of whiskey and swapping cigarettes for poker chips. It wouldn't do for me to seem too ready to play, but once I settled in, I felt more relaxed than I had in days. Sure, any of these ponies would kill me for the huge bounty if they had a clue that I was security, but why worry about that now? 5 hands in, I wasn't winning, but I wasn't losing either. So what's your story, Dusty? My story? What am I, a 2-bit novel? She asked with a chuckle. Nah, 5 bits at least, I said with a laugh. She joined my laugh as we drew new cards. Well, my name says it all. I was born to a caravan family. As soon as I could walk, we were roaming, here to Friendship City, even Philadelphia, but that was years ago. She took 2, shuffling her hand back and forth before raising. Then she continued. My dad liked to say he specialized in ammunition, and he was happy to give out free samples to raiders. Then, one day, we did some business, and he found an armed landmine in his saddlebags. They came back to finish off the rest of us. It was only a year past that my cutie mark, so they sold me in paradise. You were a slave. The thought of a pony who had been a slave protecting other slavers was beyond comprehension. Something like that. Got picked up by a society pony. They like to call their slaves servants or serfs, but you're somebody else's property all the same. Mostly was just used for sex and housekeeping for the old mare at the Applet family. Could have been a lot worse. I wasn't paying attention. My little pair was a joke to her 3 of a kind. When she died, her grandmother didn't really know what to do with me. Didn't want me for sex, didn't need me for cleaning, so she just let me go. Sweet girl. Of course, unarmed and broke, I wasn't in a real good position to survive long. Got into debt with one of the Ulstry's little pet ponies, joined with the Pecos to pay it off. I didn't really know what to say. I thought I'd gone through a lot in my week in the wasteland, but the reality was that I hadn't really experienced anything. She was so matter-of-fact about the circumstances that led to this point in her life that I felt more confused than ever. Worse, it seemed that I'd opened a door, and one after the other, the Pecos were stepping through. A buck named Big Red, who was the smallest pony at the table, had been a whore's son in flank. He'd nearly been sold for chems by his mother before running away. He'd bounced from gang to gang between Stockyard and Paradise before landing with the Pecos. Poleaxe had been at different times a bandit and a slaver, and had even once run with the Reapers, drifting from place to place for as long as he'd lived. He also freely shared his sugar apple bombs with me. Yeah, he killed ponies, but it wasn't personal. It was his work, and that was how he saw it. If it didn't work, then he was going to die. And apparently banditry and slaving was hard work. One mistake or misjudged target, and you were dead. He didn't target foals, though, and preferred not to force mares. After all, one good kick and they could take his bits clean off. His last band had gone raider. When they'd tried to get him to turn cannibal, he'd refused, and that put him on the menu instead. Now, he was with the Pecos. 'Cause it was work. Harbinger claimed she had been an acolyte for the Steel Rangers, but that a Reaper attack gutted their bunker. She'd gotten lost, ended up on the west side of the river, and signed up with the Finders for a spell in Megamart. Eventually, she got bored and hooked up with the Pecos for some excitement. She'd been able to get the building's power up from a still active subterranean power line. You mean there's still power in the city? That shocked me, given the devastation I saw around us. How? Nobody's gone to court to figure it out. Any pony who doesn't come back. The Collegiate thinks that the spark turbines in the Hoofington dams are providing power, but the controls are all wonked. Or maybe there's some power plant in the Badlands sending juice from the core, Harbinger said as she checked her cards. But yeah, they buried all kinds of stuff underground. Folks might not realize it, but Hoofington's a fucking fortress. The whole city was designed by the best minds of the MWT and Stable Tech. The Zebras seemed so dead set on destroying the city that they had to. At the end of the war, Hoofington was getting attacked by the hour. Zebras wanted it bad, but they never took it, she explained as she drew 4 cards with a soft hiss of disappointment. Now the underground territory is ghoul territory. And worse. Drives the Steel Rangers crazy, not being able to get all the tech buried down there. So which stable did you grow up in, Marigold? Dusty asked me with a grin, just as I took a pull off the whiskey bottle. I choked, stinging alcohol burning my sinuses. I didn't even have a chance to lie. Knew it. For a moment, I was sure I was in trouble, but then I realized nobody was screaming for my head. That obvious, huh? Stable ponies are always asking questions. So, what's your story? Not much. I was in my stable. Honestly, I have no idea where it was, which was true enough. It was somewhere north, but I'd be hard-pressed to find it, even with my Pip-Buck's navigation software. Our overmare went nuts and tried to kill every pony in the stable. Also, kinda true, given that she'd let in Deus and some raiders for her own survival. I managed to get out before every pony died. Been wandering around since. Something was wrong. My health felt off, like my thinking was slowed down a little. Then I caught the slight glow of magic around Harbinger's horn. What were the odds that Steel Ranger acolytes were taught interrogation spells? Was she reading my mind? If so, she had a poker face to die for. A truth spell? No, or I'd be a lot more accurate. A lie detection spell. Easiest to learn, even if I couldn't. And what did you do in your stable? Harbinger asked sweetly. I gave a non-committal shrug. Honestly, as little as I could. Played cards, mostly. 99 was all about the overmare, so as long as I didn't cross her, I was in the clear. Technically true. I hoped that it was at least true enough for her spells, since Harbinger looked disappointed. I'd assumed I'd squeaked by. So why'd you join the Pecos? Dusty asked me. Technically, I hadn't. I don't know, really, I said, thinking. If I had to join the Pecos, why would I? Then I looked at the bottle of whiskey, the cards, and the ponies around me. Guess so that I wouldn't be lonely anymore. Have a life like I did in 99. Harbinger's horn finally stopped glowing, and I took a breath. Well, here's to your life. Hope it was worth it. A bit later, the game broke up as Big Red and Harbinger left. I needed a little bit of air, so I stepped outside and into a faint drizzle. Not really even rain. I looked down at my hooves. Was there still power underneath me? Even after 2 centuries and the bombing. Hoofington was like a country within a country. Lots of secrets are buried here. Hoofington's a fucking fortress. I looked to the north at the faint green glow in the distance. Secrets. Why did it feel like EC 1101 was burning a hole in my leg? A buck lay on the porch outside of Twister's, his muzzle pressed into a filthy plastic bag reeking of dung. He inhaled deeply over and over again, twitching. Dusty caught my look and chuckled. Yeah, believe it or not, he's, supposed to be in charge here. Poor jackass is hooked on Dash that he's trying to get a buzz from huffing Brahmin shit. Can he do that? I asked in a tone of disgust. Nope, but it doesn't stop him from trying, Dusty said, closing her eyes and letting the rain play along her sand-colored face. So, guess you're not one of Sidewinder's more clueless spies. You thought I was a spy. Showing up in the middle of the night, asking questions like you do? You're something, Dusty said with a grin as she looked up at the clouds. Not a bad night. Didn't get eaten by red scorpions. Got a new Pecos with who's decent at cards. What more could a mare want? A life of her own? I asked as I looked at her speculatively. She caught my tone and looked at me. Dusty, how do you feel about slavery? Why do stable ponies ask the dumbest questions? She asked in turn with a sigh and a frown. It doesn't matter how I feel. Slavery happens. It's not even the worst thing that can happen to a pony. Ghouls losing their minds, going crazy, turning into cannibals, mutating into some creature, being torn in half by wasteland critters. There's 1,001 ways to die. Wearing a slave collar is somewhere in the middle of that list. But is it okay? I pressed. It happens. Who cares if it's okay? She retorted with a frown as I pressed my luck. There's nothing you can do about it. What if you could? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She stared at me, then looked scared. Who the fuck are you? Really? I just looked at her, pulling off the glasses and looking straight into her eyes. She shook her head slowly. No. Fuck. No, you're not. No fucking way. Yeah, I am. And I'm going to do something about the mine, just like I said I would. But I'm going to need help. I need your help. If you really don't care about slaves, then yell for the others. I wouldn't blame you, and I won't kill you. But if you do want to do something about the slaves, then help me. No, I can't. Fuck. No! How the fuck can you do this? She hissed as she paced back and forth. You saved my fucking life. You saved Tumbleweed's too. How the... She clenched her eyes shut as she sat and thumped her sides of her head. This is some fucked up booze dream, and I'm going to wake up right fucking now. I put a hoof on her shoulder. It's not a dream. It's a chance to do better. I can't guarantee it'll work. In fact, given how my plans usually go, I'll be fucking scared to death. But it's still a chance for a free life. For you, for those slaves in the mine. Dusty closed her eyes, raising her face to the clouds as the rain drizzled along her muzzle. Finally, she pulled her hat off and sighed as she glared at me. Fuck. The strip mine rang with shouts and cries as the Pecos scrambled to their hooves. Security had breached their defenses, shared their liquor, bypassed their interrogation attempts, and basically pissed in every pony's face. Now the night was filled with cries for the 100,000 cap mare's head as they scattered to the north and east in a vengeful frenzy. A lone spotlight opened up and swept across the empty buildings in an almost forlorn fashion, as if stung there'd be a party and they couldn't attend. There was such a rush for vengeance and money by those certain that security was off east towards flank that no pony thought to check along the railroad tracks just north of the ruined little strip mall. The sound of the nighttime drizzle had punctuated by the occasional shout and gunshot, gave way to the grinding of rusty wheels on heavy rusty metal and the snip of a whip on a sweaty pony's back. The incoming train rattled and banged its way towards the mine. The sound of the pulling slaves' hooves loud on the track until the cry of rocks filled the air and the pullers began stumbling. The whipmaster immediately grabbed the wheel next to her seat with her magic and spun it faster as she could. Rusty squeals filled the night air. "Move them, you worthless slugs! Move them!" The brakes were released, and the rail cars began crawling slowly along as the lead bucks shoved the rocks off the tracks, and the rest continued to pull the empty, flat carts forward. With only a few hundred yards to the mine spur, there was no time to build up their early momentum, and the cars crept slowly past the tumbled stones on the track and into the spur. The gate of the incoming track opened, and the cars began to pass under the bridge, spotlights slowly sweeping back and forth over the cars and across the interior field of the yard. One or two cars gave a corsy glare underneath the flat carts, but the hard, magical glare of the spotlights ruined any night vision they might have had. Once the train came to a stop, half the guards detached the slave ponies, while the rest headed to the two long barracks, glad for a night's rest. Apparently, 3 trips in one day was exceptionally productive for them. Some of the spotlights winked out. Others turned back towards the wasteland. Carefully, the 4 of us crept out one after another. We moved quickly to the administration building. If I were a slave owner, I'd keep the guns as far away from my own guards as from my slaves. Just inside of the door was a meeting room with 2 board guards. Lancer's rifle made a pair of soft little noises as they turned into 2 dead guards. I reloaded the resolve to never, ever annoy a zebra who could make 2 ponies dead before the first one even started falling. We moved inside before some pony spotted us. P21 and Glory went to work looting anything potentially valuable as I made my way up the stairs. Green light shone through the open door as a pony frantically typed on a terminal. "I don't care how much Sanguine wants. I'll sell for half price if he takes the thing out of here," I heard some pony whisper hoarsely. I peeked in, but only saw a fat pony typing his message, and a filthy cobalt mare wearing a dark black collar chained to the wall beside the bed. I carefully opened the door, the mare looking at me as I held up my baton to my lips. She looked at me, looked at him, then made a quiet motion to her hooves slamming together. Was she telling me to beat him up? Gladly. Wait. He wore something on his hoof, too small to be a pip-buck. What if it was some kind of alarm? He turned to spot me in my security guarding, and his hoof reached for the band. Sats popped up immediately, and I targeted 4 strikes, praying I didn't kill him. Not that in this case I'd be fussing about if he expired, but I had questions. In rapid succession, I slammed the baton twice against each of his front fetlocks and was rewarded with crunches of splintering bone. He cried out, wetting himself as he curled up into a fetal position. "You're going to get us all killed," he whispered, as his broken legs shook. Whatever the device on his hoof was, it was a lot less resilient than my pip-buck. "Isn't that line supposed to be, 'You're going to kill all of us'?" I asked as I searched his desk and found a key to the shackles the mare wore. "He's talking about Gorgon," she said as I freed her. "He's taken over the mines operations, demanded huge output. I don't know what he is, but he's a monster." The mare rubbed at where the shackles had chafed her forelegs raw. "Please tell me you can take this off," she asked as she pointed to the collar she wore. "What is it?" I asked, looking closely with a small frown. "A bomb," she replied. Instantly, I wasn't looking nearly so closely. "A bomb!" I stared at the black collar and then hissed at the fat buck. "Why the fuck would you plant a bomb on someone, you screw?" The mare gave a sigh, but also a small smile as she explained. "It keeps us from running away. Go too far and boom. Can you deactivate it?" Deactivate it? I didn't even want to breathe hard on it. I shook my head as she sighed. Too much to hope for. Somehow I found the prospect of fighting something that had the slavers scared witless a little concerning. What's Gorgon? I asked the mare as I hauled the fat, whimpering buck into her place and chained him up by his back legs. Is he a reaper? Just what I needed. Another cyber monster to get blown up by. While she spoke, I went over to the terminal and transferred what files I could onto my pip-buck. The bastard had mentioned sanguine. We were going to talk about that later. Searching his desk, I found a stack of caps and 2 glowing memory orbs. All of them disappeared in my bag. I don't know. He's strong and bulletproof, she said, nodding as I listened. If slugs wouldn't cut it, maybe grenades. They seemed incredibly effective when I used them internally. He also has a spell, I guess. He looks at you and he turns you to stone. Into stone. Okay, that just bumped him above Deus on the what the fuck-o-meter. A few days ago, I would have laughed at such claim. 41 young ponies later, I admitted that he could possibly do exactly what she said. So, strong, bulletproof, turns ponies to stone. Anything else? He can fly? The mare offered. I face-hoofed. I had to ask, didn't I? I pointed at the mine boss. Please sit on him and make sure he doesn't try anything. Downstairs, I found P21 picking the lock of the door. A half-dozen bobby pins lay scattered around him as he grit his teeth and scraped at the lock. His blue eyes swore a death oath on this door and the lock. Then there was a soft snap as the metal broke in his teeth. Allow me, I said as I floated the mine boss's key into the lock and opened it. From the look he gave me, I'd violated some lockpicker code of ethics. Inside, however, we were greeted by quite the little arsenal. Assault carbines, another shotgun, more ammunition than I hoped, dumped happily into my bags, and let my pip-buck reorganize. There were energy cartridges for glory, and a strange pointy pistol-like object that smelled of ozone. So I guessed it was an energy weapon. I tossed it to her as well, and she gave a little squee as she immediately swapped out one of the beam pistols for a new weapon. Do I want to know? I asked as I tried the carbines together to try and make them easier to carry across my back. P21 clenched his eyes shut as he dropped the few automatic pistols and revolvers into his bag. I'd have to carry the ammo, he knew. Lancer watched the door, utterly disinterested in our looting. It's a disintegration pistol. It magically breaks down the bonds, she faltered at my I'm not a smart pony look. Well, they do more damage than energy beams. There's a chance they can start chain reactions that, well, disintegrate things. Good. You almost lopped me with the word reaction, I said, as we finished cleaning out the armory. Glory spotted a medical container that had a few healing potions, but far more chems. Just take it all. No idea if it'd come in useful or not when things got rolling. Lancer, have you ever heard of a pony named Gorgon? No reaction. I take that as a no. Glory? She shook her head. Okay, apparently there's a something here named Gorgon. He's strong, he's bulletproof, he can fly, and can turn you to stone with a look. Even Lancer looked taken aback by that. Fuck me. Glory muttered softly, then blinked, and went bright red as she looked at her hooves. Sorry. That's my line, I replied with a grin at her. Anyway, I just wanted to warn you. He's in the mine, so dynamite and internal grenades if we can swing it. I looked at P21. He nodded. Zappy zappy disintegration fun from above? Glory, still looking embarrassed, gave a nod. Shoot him in the eye? I asked Lancer. He looked thoughtfully and then nodded stiffly, seemingly quite put out by taking a suggestion from me. If all that doesn't work, I'll try something stupid. Both Glory and P21 winced. That's your plan? Lancer asked skeptically. Good one, ain't it? Lots of flexibility. Now he had a definite expression. Worry. It looked good on him. The stoic mask was getting old. We dragged the bodies into the arsenal and locked them inside, wiped up the blood as well as we could, and then made our way quietly to the mouth of the mine. A barricade had been built across the entrance to the sloppy tunnel that led underground. Once again, the mine boss's key expedited our entrance, much to P-21's dismay. I passed him the keys once we were inside. Just think of them as really accurate lockpicks. Or I could think of them as keys, he replied sourly as we slipped inside the mine. Cheer up, we're facing a monster. No moral anguish here. He gave me a little smirk. Oh yeah? What if it turns out he was tragically transformed into a monster and only wants to be normal and loved? Oh, I hadn't thought of that. And suddenly the niggling thoughts began to rise up in the back of my mind. Maybe we should talk first, But P-21 suddenly stopped smiling as he reached up and turned my head to look at the side of the tunnel. Broken statues was my first impression. The most horribly accurate pony statues ever carved. Their faces were frozen in expressions of absolute horror and pain. Right. I grabbed those niggling little thoughts, wrapped them up in duct tape, and tossed them into the closet. We found a guard station, and 4 guards behind a second barricade. The sounds of machinery and grinding rock reverberated in the air, making sneaking almost unnecessary. The lighting must have been abysmal to any pony without mutated eyes. Really, it was more of a execution than an attack, with the exception that there was a large red button next to him. I didn't really know what that button was connected to. An alarm? A lockdown? Detonate slave collars? I just knew I really didn't want to find out. Just now. Lancer's silenced rifle took down the one closest to the button. Glory strafed with red beams of one pistol and slower-moving pink bolts from the other. The remaining guards scrambled for weapons and to hit the alarm, but my buckshot tore into them equally. No pony reached that button, and thanks to a barrage, no pony would. P-21 searched through the remains as I stared at the red button on the wall, chewing my hoof. What did it do? Stop staring at the button, Blackjack, P-21 said without looking up. What? I wasn't... I huffed and made a big show of checking my shotgun. When we were ready, I moved on. I glanced back at the button again. Someday. Alarm, self-destruct device, buzzer, decoration. My mood, now thoroughly ruined by the thought of being transformed into a horrified statue and thus being prevented from ever discovering the function of the mysterious button, I slogged ahead into the lead, keeping an eye out for... oh, hello. The chamber was a massive dome, pierced by a round hole at its apex. On the ground, white bones lay amid jam-encrusted stones. Strange pink and green energy seemed to bleed slowly into the rock. Crawling amidst the immense slabs of stone were dozens and dozens of ponies and zebras. A squad of guards bored down into the blocks using some kind of drill, set some explosives, and blasted the block chunk by chunk into smaller pieces. These were loaded into smaller, flatbed minecarts that were then pushed up the stone ramps by mares to a stone platform ringing the chamber, and dumped into a shaking metal ramp that fed into a rock crusher. The crusher fed the conveyor belt that ran up into the hole in the roof. Young ponies, many of whom didn't even have their cutie marks, were running up and down the belt, pulling the brightly colored gemstones from the gravel. Some pony thought of a mining system that effectively used foals in the process. Some pony needed to meet Mr. Baton. Everywhere we looked were statues of ponies frozen in positions of agony. A few appeared to have been guards rather than slaves. The guards weren't guarding. They were just working. Some looked as ragged as the slaves, as they were supposed to be watching. I felt a small sense of justice at work. But no pony or zebra deserved this. And there, lying atop the softly glowing bones, overlooking the whole mining pit, was Gorgon. At first, very first, I might have mistaken him for a white Pegasus. Then you realize that whatever he was, it wasn't a pony. His wings weren't soft, feathery things like Glory's, but instead were leathery. He had scales along his spine and flank. A long serpentine tail swayed back and forth behind him. For the first time ever, I saw a pony with eyes that glowed exactly like mine. I knew they did, because they were looking right at me. Gorgon rose to his hooves, stretched, and first his bleached white wings, and then his powerful legs. "Scatter!" I yelled, barely audible over the din of machinery in the booming cavity. He launched himself into the air as we separated, landing with a thunderous crash where we'd stood moments before. I didn't target him. I simply fired wherever I thought he was and prayed to Celestia that I'd hit some pony else. I stole little glances as I could, dancing around on the broad stone ledge. The ponies up here ran for cover, but the ones below continued working. Glory fired a stream of energy bolts from above that seemed moderately more effective than my shotgun shells. I tossed the carbines on my back at the feet of two mares. "Take them!" I yelled. The dust-coated ponies simply looked at me in horror and shook their heads. They actually grabbed pickaxes and resumed to gouge gems from the walls and the ledge. They were so scared they didn't even dare stop working. Even working to death was better than being turned to stone. My shotgun was useless at this range, so I flipped back and drew out one of the automatic assault carbines. I marveled as my pip-buck provided a magazine of interesting, armor-piercing rounds. My curiosity was piqued as I looked at the solid jacketed bullets. I didn't have many from the armory, but maybe I wouldn't need that many? I flicked the fire select switch to burst mode, my eyes picking out Gorgon and Glory's shapes as they flew around and through the jagged dragon bones heaped in the center. When Gorgon came into view, I gave a SATS-guided set of shots right into his head. And they didn't even seem to penetrate. "What the fuck is he made of?" I shouted, ejecting the magazine and moving to the green rounds. I bit my lip as he came around again. I had enough SATs charge for one burst. The toxic rifle rounds just dripped off his hide. Glory clipped the tip of the spur of bone, jerking in midair. Gorgon caught her in his hooves as they landed on the far side of the pit. His glowing eyes stared into hers. I watched as I saw her writhe. I never imagined being turned to stone would be so slow. Her equipment and violet mane turned white first. Then her limbs froze in their twisted state. And finally her head finished in still alabaster. "Lancer, please tell me you can shoot him in the eye," I thought as he took to the air once more. I raced past the still laboring ponies as I made my way to her. Not one looked at me. Not one dared stop working with Gorgon still alive. Some of the workers were fresh statues as well, having been turned to stone by accident for watching our fight. Suddenly, I heard muffled booms over the din of machinery. P-21 demonstrated his affinity for explosives by tossing dynamite as quickly as he could pop the tops of the brass. When Gorgon landed and advanced, P-21 backed away, throwing mines in his path. The monster didn't even try to step around them. The explosives scuffed his scaly hide, but not much more. I raced as quickly as I could to help. Maybe I could ram a stick of dynamite up his scaly ass. Where was... I ran into a stone wall. No, make that an invisible stone wall. My head spun for a moment before I looked up. I reached out with a hoof and saw the faint shimmer. Apparently, being turned to stone hadn't disrupted the enchantment of his cloak. I looked through the petrified zebra, watching as P-21 was transformed into a statue as well. Monsters. Deus was a monster. Gorgon was one too. My weapons were useless against monsters like them. How was I supposed to fight something like this? The only thing I could do was to see was which would apparently kill me. Then I looked at the magical lights illuminating the space. My mane began to itch. Fuck, something stupid then. I immediately began to shoot out every light I could. With each detonation, more and more darkness claimed the interior. As darkness spread, I saw Gorgon begin searching. He couldn't see in the dark. Finally, I had something going for me. I couldn't plunge the entire room into darkness. The radiation from the dragon's remains provided some illumination. I needed some way to kill him. I looked at the pile of dragon bones in the middle of the room. They'd withstood 2 centuries of mining around them. No, I needed another edge. Something to avoid being turned to stone. Gun had been my edge against Deus. Deus? Oh shit. Would that work? My mane itched like mad. Deus and Gorgon were both monsters, the likes of which I'd never seen. The mine boss had mentioned sanguine. Maybe... I trotted into the gloom, hearing Gorgon's wings whoosh over the grinding machinery. Gorgon was bulletproof, beam-proof, and bomb-proof. I hoped he was as cocky as I'd be if I were him. I moved to the nearest edge and turned my pip-buck on, bringing up the file EFS to the top. The letters should be nice, bright loom in the gloom. They were. Gorgon landed in front of me and our eyes met. Instantly, I felt a needle stab through my eye sockets and into my body. It felt as if every inch of my body was slowly being pinched off cell by cell. I couldn't look away if I wanted to, but I could scream. See this? Sanguine wants this. I yelled right into Gorgon's face, and for the first time since the battle started, he balked. You turn it to stone, and the data's fucked. I had no idea if it was true or not, but all I could do was hope that he wouldn't know either. The sensation abruptly reversed, and I swayed on my hooves for a moment. That was a sensation I'd happily avoid. I pulled out my baton as I backed till my rear hooves touched the edge. I knew there were nice jagged pieces of dragon bone down there. Come on. You want it? You'll have to take my leg first. I had no idea if he could hear me over the din, but the smile bloomed on his face. I guessed that he could. He charged, a reckless, full frontal assault that only an impregnable abomination would undertake. I didn't swing the baton. I threw it right at his head. Whether through reflex or annoyance, he closed his eyes before he rammed into me. I knew he probably planned on winging me away to tear me limb from limb. Only, I didn't just grab his scaly hide with all 4 hooves. I also used every bit of magic I could to hold his wings in place. We tumbled end over end, over the edge, and landed on the wide metal slide covered in rock chunks that fed into the rock crusher. Gorgon looked down at me and pulled back his foreleg, slamming it down with enough force to turn the rock next to my head into gunpowder. I didn't let go as we struggled on top of the rolling, tumbling rocks. A second kick grazed the side of my head, and only the helmet Keystone had given me kept my skull from being pulped. His wings struggled for freedom as he fought to get airborne once more. I gripped him as tightly as I could, not giving him the leverage. He struggled against the flow as the angle increased. I shoved hard, forcing myself a foot or 2 above him. I saw the first signs of fear in Gorgon's eyes. His scream was muted by the roar of breath as his long snake-like tail was caught in the grinding teeth of the rock crusher. Not even I could hold him then, but I didn't have to. I kicked and shoved and did all I could to keep him under me. "No, you don't!" I screamed, not caring if only Celestia heard. The rocks battered both of us. The working jaws and flow of stone pulled him down inch by inch. Hooves slammed into the teeth, and for a moment I feared he might actually break the mechanism. Then one of them caught in the pumping jaws. There was a resounding pop. I heard that scream. I stomped my hooves into his face, watching as the heavy iron jaws of the rock crusher turned red with muddy pulp. Inch by inch he was fed into the machine, and it was all I could do to keep him beneath me. I clawed at the stream of rocks as the poor foals continued with their labors. kicking wildly as popping fragments and flailing hooves battered at my barding. Some mechanism within gave a yank, and his chest disappeared into the gap. The teeth slammed down with a dry explosion of ribs, his mouth opening wide as bloody organs spewed over my legs. His jaws withdrew, and Gorgon's glowing eyes stared up at me for one final moment before the jaws slammed shut. His skull was just another rock. Unfortunately, now I struggled to keep myself out of those jaws. I kept imagining a great red button marked emergency shutoff. I hated to admit it, but I was getting tired. All I would need was one rock to pin my leg or crack my head. I wondered if I'd go through as well as, and with these poor bastards would just keep working, never realizing the monster was dead. The wings beat above me. I felt hooves hook my barding. I glanced back at the glorious sight of morning glory as the Pegasus lifted me from the crusher's feed and into the air above that work pit. The conveyor belt to the surface was a ribbon of pulped Gorgon. If he regenerates from that, I quit, I said. At least I hoped I said it. My ears were filled with endless ringing and throbbing. Glory set us down, and I realized that Gorgon's demise had finally spread to the workers. The unicorns were arming themselves with the carbines. The earth ponies took up the revolvers. I looked around for the guard workers, but saw they had a complete change of heart after being on the receiving end. There were a few lips moving from my friends, not my petrified friends. Indeed, many of the petrified ponies were once more free to move around. Broken stone ponies, though, remained broken stone. The workers used strange hoof signals I didn't understand as we made our way up to the pit. I enjoyed the sensation of a Med-X painkiller accompanied by a healing potion. I really could have used a Sparkle Cola, but given how the slaves around us appeared, it would have been kind of rude. We reached the barricade, and I looked at the bright red button with a parting sigh. We stepped out into the drizzling night. The guards had gathered, looking unsure of what to do once we emerged. Most of the slaves were exhausted. Many had multiple injuries. All of them were hungry. Few were trained in firearms. Some ponies, the guards apparently included, based on how they began rallying, might think that would put the slaves at a disadvantage against the 20 or so armed, healthy, rested guards that remained. They would be right, except that such a pony had likely never imagined the absolute rage a pony could feel when armed and facing their tormentors. Even then, the guards outnumbered 3-1. The fight that ensued was vicious. Glory strafed the few snipers that tried to pick off freed slaves from the towers along the wall. P-21 restrained himself from using explosives. Instead, he raced around the side of the battle, shouting directions and gestures to the slaves to return fire. When bullets ran out, the guns became clubs. Then the Pecos arrived. The 30 or so gang members surged in down the rail line and under the bridge, the gate having been quickly smashed open. The slavers bolstered and readied themselves to put down the uprising once and for all. Across the fighting, my eyes met dusty trails. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't hear anything. I could only hope. The Pecos crashed into the back of the slavers and took them out in one charging wave. The nasty final moments involved a few desperate hoof-to-hoof fights. Then, it was over. Dusty Trails and the other Pecos helped to deal with the wounded slaves. Whatever guards had been in the mine, they'd shed their uniforms by now. Any allegiance to the old mine was forsaken. When it was over, I yelled for P-21 to find the pantry to get them fed, and for Glory to do what she could to help the injured. Dusty Trails directed the Pecos to take positions in the guard towers. There were other things in the wastes to be wary of. I had no idea where Lancer had gone, nor did I know that I would have had him do. The dozen or so zebras stood apart from the others, watching the development with trepidation. I rubbed my ear furiously, trying to get rid of the ringing as I approached them. "Hey, rough night, huh?" They glanced at each other and made gestures. Then I realized every single one of them was deaf. Elderly Buck approached, bowing formally to me, and then said with an odd accent, "We thank you. We cannot hear your words. We must read them on your lips." "Well, you're free to go. Or stay if you want," I said, my mouth exaggerating a bit. I wasn't used to talking to deaf folk. "And that is not necessary," Lancer said behind me as his cloak deactivated. His shot between my shoulder blades slammed me to the ground, knocking the wind from my lungs and numbing my entire lower body. For a horrible moment, I wondered if I was paralyzed. Then I realized that I wasn't even the beginning, as he pointed the rifle at the clump of zebras. "For your treason against the fallen Caesar." The steam of that filled my ears as I watched him butcher every buck, mare, and foal with stripes. Then the shots ended. Not a pony raised a rifle to stop him. Every pony seemed paralyzed. Even me. "The war is never over, security," Lancer said softly before the zebra's stealth cloak shimmered, and he disappeared once more. Footnote: Level up. New perk, Tough Hide, level 1. The brutal experiences of the Equestrian Wasteland have toughened you. You gain +3 damage threshold for each level of this perk you take.